All right. Well, thank you all for joining today. So we are going to be doing a workshop. So we have some kind of prompts for you, but also some open discussion, and just looking to kind of make sure that we hear from everyone going into our next fiscal year and the budget presentation, and yeah, so we have a few things prepared for you. The first thing we have is our guiding principles. These are something that we have developed. Sorry, I wasn't starting the presentation.
For me?
Nope. Oh. So these are just guiding principles that we as a department have kind of come together for to use when we do collaborative sessions such as this one. So we wanted to share them with the group here. If there are any that you have any concerns with or would like to make changes to for today's effort, please let us know. Happy to do so. They're almost up there. And all right, so build trust and show respect, be explicit about decisions and follow-up actions, incite collaboration, focus on team building, practice empathy, stay curious, and welcome diverse contributions. All right, so next we have a just kind of a summary of the section in our city code that focuses on the Mobile GR Commission's scope of responsibility and kind of the purpose of this this body. We are joined today by Michael from our attorney's office, who is going to help kind of go over this just really quickly before we get into the discussion portion of the workshop.
So that's just a broad overview of your responsibilities. Basically, as members of the Mobile GR Commission, your role is to offer suggestions, recommendations to the City Commission on key transportation mobility issues. You're not expected to set policy or make final decisions. Instead, you use your experience and provide advice, insight, and thoughtful deliberations during your meetings that help inform and support the City Commission's policymaking. Your actions are non-binding, but they are important because the City Commission relies on all of you to give a better understanding of community needs and perspectives. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact the City Attorney's Office. We're there to help be able to resource for you to utilize.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions on that? We felt that was extra important to talk about today, especially because we're going to be going over things such as prioritization and discussion around kind of future visions for the city and this the work that we are covering. All right.
Yeah, I would just say, having been on for about a year now, this is one of the real reasons I thought of doing this, because honestly, I don't feel like there is a track record of us actually making recommendations on anything. One of the things I've said a lot is I'm really tired of being on boards where my central focus is to say, there are many boards I'm on the right who are like, well, here's what Ryder Circle was last month, and I say, or here's what the stats are on this, and I say, so I think this, I hope that this board can pivot and grow to actually saying, we recommend X, we want Y in general, and get into a rhythm of actually doing that.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts on that? All right, thank you. So we are going to have some pretty open-ended discussions today, but we also wanted to share some information on a what we're calling the mobility blueprint, which is some direction we're taking from the community master plan implementation. So the mobility blueprint is it is basically a long-range transportation plan for the city of Grand Rapids. It's connecting many of what we would maybe say are gaps or some need for depth in so many of our existing strategic plans, such as the current existing Equitable Economic Development and Mobility Strategic Plan, but also things like the Community Master Plan, the Vital Streets Plan, larger regional plans such as Safe Streets for All, Safety Action Plan, the GVMC 2050 Plan, the Rapid Master Plan, lots and lots of plans, all the area-specific plans. We're looking at all of the places there where they have identified a need for mobility and building off that and adding some depth and filling in gaps where we can. The purpose of this is to, and this is based on feedback that we gathered through the community master plan effort primarily, but also through all these other plans that were already created, is to create a people-centered, data-driven roadmap for safe, equitable, and sustainable mobility in Grand Rapids, and integrate community priorities with city and regional goals to find or to guide future mobility investment. So it's a very investment-focused plan to make sure that we are identifying a data-driven prioritization method for these investments that are aligned with what the community is asking for.
I would also like to interject here. So yes, we are traditionally as a city very master plan oriented. If you ask them, if you ask people on the street what their number one concern is in the city, it's often housing. And traditionally, mobility things have talked about economic development, like, oh look, mobility is good for jobs. I think that is an outdated analysis. I think that we have to start being able to prove that mobility has value for lowering the cost for better housing outcomes. And specifically, what I am saying a lot these days is if I can eliminate a car in my life, I've eliminated $10,000 a year in cost. So right now, for example, the city does an affordability metric for housing that says these housing units are, for people making 60% AMI. Well, you can afford a lot more house if you don't need a car. So you can afford to pay a lot more for rent in an area where something other than a car is a viable transportation option. So I think this group should actually lead that charge on discussing the merging of transportation costs and housing costs. Like, think of them as a basket. So housing plus transportation cost equals X percentage of your budget. If we talk about that instead of simply income versus housing, you get a much more accurate picture of the value of the work that we're doing.
Thank you, and I do think what is important here, and the next slide goes over the engagement process, and that's very key because this is extremely early on in the creation of this blueprint. But to align with that this is trying to connect specifically the mobility-focused ways that we can help all those other plans that exist throughout. So I think it does align with how can mobility help with housing, how can mobility help with safety, and all the other important things that all these other plans are focusing on, but provide the depth that's needed specifically for how to solve these through a mobility lens.
Not to mention.
So the next slide goes.
I said not to mention employment as well.
Sorry.
Not to mention mobility and its effects on employment.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely, and school education. I mean, there's just sustainability. There are so many plans that are specifically focused on strategic planning for those initiatives, and we want one specific on mobility. But again, it's building off these other current plans that focus on things like employment and housing, economic development. The engagement process is going to heavily involve this group here, which is why we're bringing this so early on. Of course, it will also involve the City Commission, and then bodies such as the Vital Streets Oversight Committee and the Planning Commission, as well as we are going to be working to develop internal and external stakeholder groups to collaborate with the community. We don't want to keep going back to community and asking the same questions, so we are building off the efforts that have already happened in community. They're very, in my opinion, they're very clear. We're here today to talk about that. But community has been very clear what they want with mobility, and that's what came out of the efforts like the community master plan and the area-specific plans. So what we are looking mostly to do here is to determine how we can accomplish that, how we can identify a system that is, again, data-driven and community-driven to prioritize projects to make sure that they're done, and then we can identify funding sources, and we can identify kind of a planning effort to make sure we have an integrated and connected mobility network. So we do have some open-ended questions and discussions. That's what primarily is going to be about today, but I'm happy to answer any questions specifically about this mobility blueprint effort, if anyone has any. Just maybe more about the logistics of it or our vision for it. If there's anything here that you see, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So I do. How do you envision this working as is it supposed to be a policy recommendation, or a guide to the city commission for making policies, or is it sort of supposed to be something that gets into the weeds, thinking of bikes or something like a bike network, mapping, any of that stuff? So how do you see it? Is it sort of a big umbrella or more a specific policies?
So typically with a long-range plan, focused on transportation network development, it would be something that we would encourage the city commission to adopt, just like your community. With the continued implementation of, if you think about an umbrella, the community master plan is your big umbrella for development of the city. A mobility plan is an umbrella over development of the transportation system with all of the bits and pieces tied into it, like with the popcorn around here we're talking about with housing, employment, those things. That's kind of the big why. And then a mobility plan really focuses on what are those nitty-gritty details to get us from current state to a future state. This particular plan, what I'm recommending is the plan pops out a capital improvements list. That's the difference between implementation and like a real kind of sticky plan and a plan that sets policy, like I think you're referring to. So have I answered your whole question?
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, the capital improvement is, that's very helpful. Because I'm just thinking, like, the community master plan and like climate action plan, all these plans, like, have a series of recommendations. So, like, is this going to be similar or has recommendations that are kind of broad, or will it have more specific?
So, yeah, it will, and again, we're crafting it, so I don't want to be too fond of anything, but the vision that we have here is it will have that long-term vision, but tied with every 3 years reassessing a 5-year capital improvement plan that will be based on the prioritization that's developed with that long-range vision. So you really will have that short-term, again, in our vision, a short-term view of how we are implementing specifically the network connections. And I think that's one of the big things that we've seen a gap in historically, is that we're doing a lot of really cool infrastructure, safety infrastructure specifically, but just multimodal infrastructure that's not being focused network-wise. So by doing this and having that long-range vision tied with a short-range, every 3-year refresh, the 5-year capital, I think it will achieve that goal.
So getting to the mayor, sorry to interrupt, but I feel like having been on this commission for a minute, in order to effectively accomplish what the mayor is talking about, I think there's got to be some recommendations to the city commission as to what this body and how effective this body could be, and how do we change, whether it's the city commission's opinion or city manager or city government, and just in general, to make this body, this commission, more effective. And I think that's part of the workshop.
And I think if this body starts having recommendations, then Jessica can start briefing city commission, and she can get her on the agenda, and she can then say, hey, here are 5 things that OGR thinks are urgent. I do think, I just want to name one sort of elephant or potential, governance dynamic generally, and that is, I think the city is very good at coming up with long-range plans, but often those plans can become an impediment to short-term action. And so I think that, for example, I can give you examples. One example would be, I want to have more dog parks in the city. And what I get is, well, we have a 5-year plan for that. We plan to have one more in 2027. I'm like, for God's sake, $30,000 investment. It's like it's a chain link fence. This shouldn't be that hard, and we should be able to just go and make 30 of them in the next 3 months. If this was the private sector, I'd have 30 dog parks in the city in the next 3 months. It's not that hard, but it's not going to happen. And what I keep getting is, well, we have a 20-year plan for this, and we do one every year. If I could just keep going just for a second. So I think we have to be sort of a walk and chew gum at the same time model, and we have to, but focusing how we talk about things then. Like, I think long-range planning is great, but sometimes long-range planning can get buried in a desk drawer too. That's the real nightmare, right? You come up with a plan and nobody refers back to it, or we say, oh, it's obsolete. Well, So the other thing that I want to just put out there is 2 things. One, I hope that the city will move into much more of an experimental mindset generally, and I think that I would love to see this body think in more of an experimental mindset, not what are we going to do that's gonna last for the next 30 years, but what can we try that might work? And be willing to just name it as an experiment, and then we can change direction if we have to. But if you try stuff, you get more interesting results, in my experience. Finally, we have a short-term, like when we're talking about capital expenditures, we have a short-term, and I don't want to use the word emergency, but I don't know what other word to use. We have more money coming from the state, significantly more money for road funding. If we don't come up with recommendations for how that money gets spent fairly quickly, like within a month or two, we're not going to have a voice in how that money actually gets allocated. I mean, we can make a 3-year plan, come back with capital expenditure recommendations in 18 months, but I think it's a nearer term need than that. I think we should come up with some pretty clear asks and visioning right now, less the money gets spent on the status quo, which is what I hope won't happen with new money. I think new money should do new stuff, ideally. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, it's great. So this is what this workshop's all about today, is like pulling from you all, and I'm really appreciating some questions around clarity around what is a mobility blueprint, what is a long-range plan, what are we talking about here, because for when we kind of get through settling those sort of questions, Max has got 3 distinct questions to help spur some conversation to help us refine this idea. So what I want to answer a couple of questions that I can hear percolating up, and then give us some more. We'll get through kind of the sorting of what are we even talking about today. So one thing, when I said long range plan, that is probably a little bit worrisome, right? So a long range plan is typically a 20-year planning horizon. That doesn't mean that I'm looking at projects in 20 years. With a plan that is what I call fiscally constrained, a fiscal constraint plan pops out a couple of things. One of the things after you set your existing conditions and what the vision is, and then you get down into some technical nitty-gritty of like what that system would look like. When you talk about those capital plans, typically I can't plan a capital investment plan much past about 5 years with a lot of certainty, and then at 10 years is when my crystal ball totally gives out. So in this particular type of like plan model, we'll call it like framework, I would expect a 10-year capital investment program, and then what you do with that 3-year review cycle that Max was describing is every 3 years we go back and refine it. The important thing to consider here is, I think the mayor was mentioning something earlier, which was really important, is that he was saying, I don't know that this body has made a whole lot of recommendations. And I was looking through some of the recommendations made through this body in the past, and because I was looking for our Vision Zero resolution, which happened in 2018, or 2017, end of 2017, early 2018. And the commission adopted resolution supporting that Vision Zero resolution, if you will. And what popped out of that, here we are about 8 years later, was a Vision Zero, 2050 Vision Zero safety action plan that came out of the NPO recently. So those are some things that are kind of where kind of the kind of delayed gratification, if you will, of working in transportation planning and investment. So I really do want to point out, though, that even though it is a long-range plan, right, a mobility plan can have short-term solutions in there. And so that's one of the things that we're going to bring up. We have a question around that, too. So, what I want to make sure is that I've got kind of questions answered about what is a plan. And obviously, things are going to pop up as we continue to talk. So we're talking about a 20-year planning horizon, which just means that the planner looks out to the future and says, what is this place going to look like in 20 years? And what do we need to do in the next 5 to 10 years to prepare for that, right? And that looks at things like housing, employment, population growth, demographics, all of that good stuff. Hopping out a capital plan is really, really important so that you have something to work for. I call that an implementation chapter. And then the other piece that's really, really important as you develop overarching transportation policy, which that's what I would call this, a policy document with an implementation plan on the end. When you start to develop overarching transportation policy for your city, what you might look at is what are those big goals that you have in mind, and what are those policy setting information? And that's where I think that this body can find a lot of value in going through a planning process like this. Not just to have a plan on the shelf, but so that you have a plan that's implementable, has a review cycle for updates, and then the final little piece is really being able to weigh in and think about what is the criteria for prioritization. Because even though there is money coming down the pipe, and we do have a healthy budget for capital projects, there's still always more needs than there are projects, right? A lot of competing needs. So that prioritization piece and what that criteria looks like for your capital plan is really, really important. And that's all part of your policy development process. And that's my small speech about what a long-range plan is and what the short-term implications are.
Just wanted to also say,
Yeah.
we are being very intentional, and again, it's early, but we want to get all the feedback. We're being very intentional to include like emerging trends and technologies is a big part of that. All the short-term programs and policies that we can do as well. So obviously, long-term is so important for one, gathering resources and funds, and two, planning a connected network. But short-term, and there is a question specifically around this later. We want to get some insight on, but we have we're going to be very intentional in that as well.
So before Max moves on to those questions to help have that more bigger discussion, does anybody have any questions about the plan itself, like kind of concept?
What's the time frame for kind of getting this plan together?
So
Couple of things. One, this is part of the alignment process, is hearing what you all have to say. The other part is City Commission is having conversations tomorrow, and a large part of those conversations are focused on mobility. So that'll help the city manager really refine next steps. So these are two really important conversations. And then our hope is that once we're going to need to have some consultant help, because Max has a lot of things to do. So we would plan to put a consultant in on to help with the analysis and technical work on this plan. And the procurement process could take 6 to 8 weeks on that. So from the time that we get a kind of final go-ahead. So you were looking at, let's say we get alignment and we're sorted out by the end of the year, you're probably looking at starting the project about March, and it typically will take about 18 months. And then from there, I always put a little fluff 6 months on the end for adoption and external alignment, if you will, with the City Commission and this body.
And everybody else try to be as loud as possible, because I have a lot of thoughts here, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I also have knowledge seeking, so please
Sure,
don't let me
sure.
dominate this. But I do have a couple things I want to say.
Can I squeeze in a question first?
Go ahead.
So from what I understand, we're trying to develop a 5-year plan, and that will break down into capital like line items for year 1, year 2, year 3, and then we'll revisit that. So that's like the immediate short-term breakdown of how this long range will sort of like amortize, if you will, and pan out. So I guess, like, correct me if that's not how I should be understanding it. I think there's like also a policy part, so everybody can get on the same page and departments aren't siloed. I guess I'm also wondering, how is engineering playing into this? Like, how will they be directed based off of this policy document?
Okay, so it's hard to hear you a little bit, Janelle, so just because you speak so low, but I think I heard what is the length, so it's a 20-year plan that you look at short-term, mid-term, and long-term. You were describing that a little bit. Short-term, I would say 5 years, mid-term 10, long-term 20. Typically, you want to look at a capital plan that is pretty good about the first 5 years. That 10-year, those next 5 years, is a little bit wonky, but we can estimate out there. And then you have those update cycles are really important to refine those. But you really just kind of look 10 years out at a time for capital plans.
And specific to the engineering part of it is, so currently the way the city is prioritizing their projects, no matter what it is done in a different way than we feel like the community has asked for based on feedback that we're getting from Community Master Plan and other things.
Yeah.
So this is looking at identifying a way to create a new prioritization method that would influence the engineering, any projects that go on in the city in the public right away. And that's like capital improvement plan.
I think what we should really be clear about too, the capital improvement program process is identified in a policy currently today. And so that is what the city follows right now. And I think what Max is talking about is how do you, if you can't kind of lift transportation out of the citywide capital improvement program, it has to be a piece of it. engineering is the department that implements capital improvement projects, right? So part of the work here with any plan at the city is there's kind of the internal stakeholder group that has the departments weigh in with their areas of expertise. Does that help?
Yeah, so then this policy will sort of define that direction that engineering will take. They'll just take the plans and implement them.
Yeah, so engineering typically is not a department that drafts policy, and then you've got to remember that no matter what we do, when we draft policy, city commission sets policy, and that's what Michael was talking about earlier. Does that make sense? So even any plan or policy that pops up at the end of the day, all of the work that's done when it comes to commission also weighs in it and then decides whether or not to set that policy. And that policy can be for anything, including how you develop capital projects. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
So, yeah, I would actually I'd like us all to think for a minute here. And, with the greatest respect, Jessica, that's, when you start saying 5-year capital improvement projects, that sounds like sort of what I'm used to hearing is in engineering time scaling, and it's a very long time scale. And if I'm building like I-96, that makes sense to me. Like, I can see that those things take a long time. But I would like to challenge us operationally to think about things that simply happen on a much faster time scale than that. And it seems to me if things have 3 characteristics, they can happen much quicker. One is they don't cost much. One is they're fast to do, and the other is they're reversible. Now, they don't have to be all of those things, but for example, if this group were to say, hey, I recommend that you change Lion and Fountain to 2-way streets, that is actually, we know that's not hard to do because we did it during the pandemic. We know it's reversible if it causes the zombie apocalypse, and we know it's not that expensive. Or if we said, hey, let's try all the lights on Division from X to Y being 4-way flashers. Again, low cost, reversible, fairly quick to do. So I don't think that doesn't need to, if you start saying we have a 5-year time scale for things, then, for example, if you want to see Rosalind Bliss's head partially explode, talk about converting Ottawa to a 2-way street. I mean, she tried to get that to be a conversation and an action item for 8 years. Well, yeah, if you got a 5-year time scale, then people will kind of forget about it. So I would like us to think about things that can be done quickly that are totally subsumed to that longer term side. Of course, we need a long-term time scale for major durable things, but I also just want to name what I think is frankly a flaw or at least a weakness to the complete streets model. The theory is great, like rebuild the roads when you're redoing your sewer, but if that gives you lack of continuity on key mobility issues, you got a problem.
Okay, and I appreciate that.
You all know.
Yeah, and I do want to, so we have some discussion that we're going to get into. I just wanted to quickly wrap up this part of the mobility blueprint. The main reason we brought that up is because this next discussion about ideas such as those and just the general priorities are going to be so helpful in us, and we're going to continue to come to this body on this long-range plan, long and short-range plan. I keep using long-range plan. That's why we decided to use blueprints. Blueprints are much short and long kind of vision.
Yeah, just
So-
another comment though. I mean, I think what the mayor is suggesting still goes to the long-range plan. These are just things that we could implement sooner and test them, but they're still in keeping. We wouldn't, we shouldn't be doing something that's not part of the community master plan that's already been established. But these are kind of, how do we get things done more quickly, even in a test mode? And how does this group affect we have to remember that staff works at the pleasure of the city commission and the city manager. They don't work at the pleasure of us. So we have to steer the city commission and the city manager to help them be able to affect any change, even short term. So
The only reason I went to move on is because we have sections just for this thing.
Yep.
So don't mean to suppress this conversation a lot.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
It should be quick. So when you say fiscally constrained, is that assuming like the budget we have now? Does that assume like more money? Does that assume less money? Because, I don't want to it's smart to prioritize projects within the budget we have now. But but I don't want to be constrained in a 20-year timescale, to not assume that we'll get like a windfall. You know,
So that's a great
$50
question.
million.
That's a great question. When in planning and then in capital planning, when you talk about fiscal constraint, what that does is you think about reasonable expectations around your financial like revenues, like what's coming in. And typically what I would recommend is look at history and then also look at kind of like what you're suggesting is, are there opportunities in the future that we can focus, you know, for grant opportunities and things like that. So, but that's something that we would dig down into once we get to kind of the fiscal constraints part of the plan.
And one of the other things that I really like about this idea is it's focusing heavily on a prioritization method. And that, because we can't predict the fiscal constraints of the future, but if we have a prioritization method, like I say, right, then we can, you know, do extra projects based on that. If we get the top 3 done, we have extra money, we can do number 4, just to be simple about it. But, so I think this kind of helps with that.
So let's hop into some of this other, what happened?
Well,
Let's hop into the next piece of this conversation, but what I want to just reset is these are really great topics for discussion today. We're really looking at what this overarching policy for city transportation would look like. Because that doesn't truly exist right now at the city, this is an effort to set that up. And once you set your overarching policy, moving forward with quick things is much simpler. And I know it feels like it takes a long time, but it's one of those an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure kind of thing.
So we have our city values here. The reason we tried to fix this, but we just couldn't. I'm sorry about the presentation looks great on the computer, but not on the presentation here. Hopefully everyone knows our city values here at the City of Rapids. Sustainability and equity are the two on the left that we'll cut out. The reason we're bringing this up is because these questions are really framed through these values, but also when we kind of collect and report out on your feedback, we're going to be looking at that as well. So if we hear something that we think aligns with accountability, we're going to try to attach it to those values. So just wanted to draw attention to them again. If anyone has any questions about the values, happy to answer them. But sustainability, innovation, customer service, equity, collaboration, and accountability. All right, so we have the first one. I mentioned how much I love prioritization. So we only have one prioritization question, then we're going to get a little more open-ended. But our first one is something that you do have to use a device for. If you do not have a device, please let us know. We can get one for you. Go to the next slide here. Oh, no. You're good.
You're doing great, Devin.
Yeah, this is, we have one with lots of little tweets.
A device sounds like a euphemism. Ken's got glasses, does that count?
Janelle does too. Depends what kind of.
Slido's a little bit goofy, but you guys are gonna, there'll be what do you do, a scan?
QR code or
Not a
a link.
QR code or a link, but what you can also do is on your device, go to slido.com, it's SLIDO. And there we go. Okay, so here's your little thing. You can also go to, I like to go to slido.com. Wow, this is really cutting off, isn't it? And you'll key in this number, that 1692-16.8. If for some reason you can't get that little guy right there.
Sorry,
So-
does it choose one?
So you can pick up to 3. And the question is, what should the mobility blueprint prioritize? We have transit infrastructure, bike infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, transportation demand management ordinance, transportation demand management communications, and parking incentives.
I don't understand what 4 and 5 are.
So 4 and 5, so transportation demand management is basically just a way to incentivize and educate people on how to do multimodal options. So an ordinance would be something that would ask for basically like a permitting system or some sort of licensing system for anyone who's building new properties or is opening things that would have to, so like you have a parking requirement in some places, this would be like you have to have multimodal options like bike infrastructure or bike parking or something along those lines, bus passes provided to employees.
So we
And-
currently don't have a transportation demand management.
We do
ordinance.
not.
So you're saying, do we want one?
Yes. And then a transportation demand management communications would basically be like if we went out to community and said, here's some benefits, we can provide bus passes for you, or we can help educate your employees or your customers about different ways they can get around the city. So the main, oh, sorry.
I don't want to stifle this with questions, but I heard this particularly, like, do we want it, yes or no? The question is, do we want to prioritize
Right.
the creation of
Good
that?
point, good point.
Just for anyone else.
Yes, that's a great clarification. And so these are just different options of different ways that we can help achieve the goals that we think are pretty clear that have been expressed by this body when we met earlier this year, but also in the community master plan. The folks are looking for safer, more sustainable ways and affordable ways to travel across the city. These are different options that are pretty common across the country to approach those, and we're interested in the prioritization of those solutions. And this is nothing final. We're going to have a conversation based on what we see here. So, yeah, that's the problem with prioritization. Any other questions on how they're listed? They're a little broad on purpose because, like I said, we want to expand on them. So I didn't want to be too. Anyone still working on? Okay, so we can see the results. All right, so we have transit infrastructure and bike infrastructure as 1 and 2, with pedestrian infrastructure a close third. We mentioned the transportation demand ordinance before, then we have transportation demand management communications and parking incentives at the bottom. So what we are interested, oh, actually, say back, sorry, you're good. So from a conversation standpoint, what does transit infrastructure look like to folks?
BRT.
Okay, so more.
The adhering to the bus rapid transit BRT guidelines, like strictly. So there should be a dedicated bus lane.
Yeah, I mean, what's the use of a bus if you just get stuck behind other cars? It's the same as driving. If you build the infrastructure to enable that much faster bus route, it's going to be a more attractive option to people.
Okay.
There will also be, like, single car free, like the bus.
Gotcha.
Bus availability to the bus routes and frequency.
Okay.
It's one thing.
Yeah.
It's money infrastructure.
Someone. All right, any other thoughts on what transit infrastructure is? What about bicycle infrastructure? We talked about this a little bit before, but I'm interested to expand upon it again. Is it a bike lane? Is it protected? Is it?
Well, I think there are, boy, I think there are at least 3 things in bikes for me. There's, there's 4. I put them with they're alliterated, so here we go. One is continuity. Bike lanes that start and stop are useless. One is consistency. I want to know what the heck our plan is for how we do bike lanes. I don't want to see a different one every time I see a project. I don't have any idea of what's going on before it appears on the sidewalk or wherever it appears. The other is communication, which I guess relates to that. And finally, creativity. So I think that there are spaces, but I also, for me, the big thing that I can't even think about bikes right now without thinking, and I think this body would be a great place to have this futures discussion. I personally think that there is a huge difference between whether you're planning for Amsterdam cycling or Manhattan cycling. Manhattan cycling is people going 25 miles an hour on 4-inch wide tire e-bikes. I don't want those things on my sidewalk. Amsterdam biking is 8 miles an hour, nobody wears a helmet because everyone's going 8 miles an hour. They wander around and they get around the potted plant and put in the sidewalk because they're only going 8 miles an hour. I think, frankly, in the United States, if I were to bet, I'd bet that the future is Manhattan, not Amsterdam. Because we're such a car-dominated society. So I have a bike that goes 45 miles an hour. The reason I have it is because I can match car speeds. And I am convinced that is the way I keep safe. I biked here today on something that maxes out at 18 because my primary bike's in the shop, scares the daylights out of me. Cars are getting close to me all the time. They're pushing me off the road. They're getting pissed at me. So I think that, Ken's going to completely disagree with me, maybe, but I think there's a fundamental question of like, where do we think the future's going in America? E-bikes have just started. But I just keep seeing people who say like, I rode one for the first time, I thought they were bull crap, now I'm committed. My wife is a complete convert, so I think they're they're like electric vehicles, only more so. They're a completely different mode of transportation, and we gotta be clear what we're building for. If we're building for both, we're building for both. But I don't think we can build without remembering, how I'm actually getting around the bike right now.
When I think about bike infrastructure, I think about framing it in like, what should we be doing, what could we be doing, what are we doing, where we're at right now. We need separated protected bike lanes, but ideally, if I Sims God mode, I would just put everybody on in one lane. And to the mayor's point, matching the speeds. Matching just means, it doesn't mean that one has to go up, it's multi-directional. I would use the speed governors in cars to limit them to 25 miles an hour. You already do that to residents who are using e-bikes and e-scooters. You're restricted when you're in the downtown area to sometimes as low as like 9 miles an hour. Those things aren't really accurate. If we invested in a more accurate infrastructure, that would be a lot safer, so that cars were limited to going to 20, 25 miles an hour downtown. We could share the road. We can use all that surplus money instead of building the separate infrastructures because drivers are irresponsible. We could use it for so many other things. We could use it for bus shelters and everything else. So right now, where we are, we need separate and protected bike lanes. But what we should be doing is aiming towards, that should be our North Star, is aiming towards a shared road for everyone, where there isn't a waste in infrastructure, but we have to use that waste right now to save lives.
It also
Now that I
helps
wanna-
with trying to retrofit existing infrastructure or existing roads is difficult. And I'm not a biker like the mayor, but it makes sense that if you have to start and stop, then that's not a great mode of transportation.
And
But I like
push
where
out
it's
of the
going.
traffic, that's
Yeah,
your real
exactly.
death opportunity.
Yeah, and specifically, I don't know, I'm not gonna pretend I'm great at the policy of it, but I'm also looking at, the individual, and I'm looking at it from both the workforce lens, but also what resonates is the piece of how do we sell people on this idea that maybe you only do need one car. And so then transit and biking comes in. And the people in my mind I'm thinking about are, how realistically, because to a great degree, you need transportation in order to go to a job. Many of the individuals who are struggling, having these as, dinner table conversations of do we sell our car, are probably working, entry-level positions or maybe a little bit higher. So I'm looking at how are we making it so individuals are seeing that I can bike or transit effectively to get to my job, that I can actually look at that as an option. I'm then looking at a mother, maybe with 2 kids, who either she or her significant other can see, we don't need one car, or we don't need 2 cars, we need one. And then overall, how do we promote the viability of transit to residents, and then the overall feeling of safety, right? I think protected bike lanes is one. I don't think Grand Rapids will ever be in a place where we can, if this is my understanding of it, change or alter the governor on private citizens' cars. I don't think we'll ever be there, but there is that if we are owning items. So that's how I'm looking at it, is the overall communication of safety, and what infrastructure are we making to see this, to help people see this as a viable option.
And actually, communication's up there at the end on one thing, but the question, I think a question for us could be, like, are we in the communication business on all this stuff? And how can we be in the communication business on all this? Now, let me backtrack off of what I just suggested, because there's another less radical option, which I'm currently considering, which is becoming a 1.5 car family. So bear with me a second. A 1.5 car family uses their car in the winter. What they do in the other 6 months of the year is they put it in a garage. Now, cars devalue, partly because of the number of the year it was printed, but mostly that's a reflection of how many miles has it got on it, how much wear have you done to it. So if you put a car in a garage, it actually lasts pretty well in the garage, and you avoid about 75 to 90% of the cost of that car for those 6 months. Yes, you get a little depreciation, but it comes out of the garage with no more miles on it than when you put it in. and it comes out with, and you didn't have to insure it over the winter. So a lot of, and you didn't put fuel in it, and you didn't have to do maintenance and all that stuff. So a 1.5 car family still saves $5,000 a year. They don't save $10,000 a year. So we may become a 1.5 car family because I'm getting lots of people telling me they don't want me to die on the road this winter, and I'm trying to listen to them. So, I mean, you know, ice and snow are real, right? We can build all the infrastructure we want. We can't get rid of winter. We can't accelerate global warming fast enough to have it not freeze this winter. So that was a very that politically correct, sarcastic.
So I actually really like what Chad said about like that communication aspect and the perception of the public on how possible these things are. And I think part of that too comes from obviously like visibility, having more people doing it, people who feel safer. If they say people like them doing something, they're more likely to do it. To the point of like appealing to families, I am, you know, a proponent that the most influential vehicle of this decade will be a car or e-bike, and not a car. Because a car or e-bike is a car replacement. You know, you put your kids in it, take them to school, to daycare, whatever, you know, you can haul groceries, you can do all these things. And so if we can have like education and visibility around these options that aren't just like, you know, the mayor's bike that goes 45, which is terrifying. Like, you know, more options like this. And one of the things that looks like in a lot of cities is like an e-bike purchase incentive, a rebate program, because these are expensive. Like a car e-bike is going to cost you like $5,000, right? It's not compared to a car, right? It's still cheaper than a car, but it's still an expensive investment. And so if you can incentivize purchasing that through like a rebate or a discount, whatever, you know, that also will.
Or help make it less scary to make it.
I also think that like there's a lot of smart, engaged people around the table here, but like all of these, you know, the question of communication, bikes get scoffed at by a large percentage of the community right now, and so that seems to be a communication challenge. But I will also point out that it just occurred to me, bikes and transit talk to each other in a not maybe direct, intuitive way. That is to say, okay, so if I decide I'm not going to use my bike for the next 6 months, I'm then looking around for alternatives. So maybe I'm a 1.5 car family, or maybe I actually figure out how to use the bus. I mean, in my case, what I'm going to do is start walking. That's my other option, but I'm going to shift modes, right? So, if I'm a 6-month-a-year bike user, that's actually good for the transit system because I consider a bus in a way that I never would have before, because I just had my 12-month solution, which was a car.
I think bike infrastructure for me, in the context of this mobility blueprint, is a defined map with defined street cross sections of what each route will look like. I think that will help make our transportation, like transit and bike infrastructure, more defined, more consistent, and it will just help get all these departments on the same page of what things will look like. If we're talking about connecting this very disjointed bike lane network that we have in our city, when we're talking about capital projects to connect each lane, we have to be on the same page of what the whole vision will look like. It sounds like we're not going to redo the bicycle action plan. This is going to be part of this mobility blueprint. I just would like to see actual like concrete vision of what each street will look like and what each connection will look like.
I think this gets back to communication too. Using myself as a dumb bike lane user, I like when I'm shocked how often I'm like, oh, I didn't know there was a bike lane on Monroe. Because when I'm driving in my car, I don't even see it. It's invisible to me because it's a white line with no signage in it. So communication isn't just like putting out a newsletter. It's being like, yo, this is a bike lane, we're not kidding. Or signs that say, turn left here if you want to keep going on the bike lane or whatever. So I think wayfinding, all that kind of stuff. And so infrastructure and communication are kind of the same thing. If I don't know it's there, I'm not gonna use it, and yeah, I certainly can't plan around it. But that means, it doesn't just mean telling the bikers about it, it's telling people in cars about it, because people in cars are potential converts.
That's why the TDM was important to me and has been, because we're talking to those people as much as we are bike advocates, right? We live and breathe that. The person coming in from Rockford who comes downtown to work, shop, whatever, doesn't. They don't know even what this left lane bus thing is, right? They just don't understand it, nor do they even understand, like, I didn't need to drive from Rockford, there's ways I could. Well, and there's not, right? It's not. But that's why, to me, I think we need to look at, you know, obviously the city, and I know we think downtown a lot too, but like kind of going out and looking at contiguous, you know, suburbs and how people come into the city in alternative ways. Just even understanding those are options in this, whether that be buses, bike, and having shared, you know, any of those options.
And I think framing shifts matter. So when we talk, I get pitched on tourism all the time for Grand Rapids. And one of the things I've said recently is, okay, that's great that you can get tourists to come in for X, Y, or Z. What makes me happy is every single person that comes into my city is auditioning my city as a place to live. So tourists for me are potential future residents. If you think of tourists as potential future residents, then you're marketing the city. It's not a playground for other people to come in and consume and remotely buy a burger. So that framing shift for me is kind of important on tourism, but the framing shift on bike lanes, like how do we convince people these things are viable?
So this is very helpful, and I really appreciate it. I just want to also, there's two things I want to say quickly. One is I would love to respond and talk about all these, but I'm trying to be great listening, so just know. I'm happy to engage further on this on board. Two, we have a couple of other questions I want to get to, but first I want to offer Wesley, Chris, and Adam a chance, since I think you're the only three that haven't spoken yet. Anything you want to add to this part of it before we move to the next question?
Yeah, I can go. One thing that I think, and I was thinking about this in the before question, when we talk about transit infrastructure, I know for the city water lines, and these are more residential streets, we have about, I think, 1/3 of all streets that we still have to rip up to do that. And so I think when we're redeveloping some of those streets, and obviously some of them are residential, so it's not as like bike lane, needed. But when we do that, I think we should definitely make sure we have a hand in that, being like, if we're going to rip up this road anyway, we do the sidewalks like my house did 1 year ago to do the water main. Make sure when we replace that, we have, actual infrastructure built in when we're already doing that.
I would add and say I agree with a lot of what's been shared. I think that and I don't want to sound pessimistic, but I think the bike piece is an uphill battle. I really do. I think it's an uphill battle. Changing the habits of drivers and speeders and all of that comes with that's an uphill battle as to how you create a space that's safe. I'll give you an example. One of my drivers was downtown, turning around through he ran into a construction site. He's turning around in one of our vehicles, and a drunk driver speeds through the construction zone and T-boned him. There's no way that he saw this coming. There's nothing he could have done differently. It's just what it is. And when you think bikers, I think those are some of the issues that you deal with on a Friday night, a Saturday night, late morning even. When everybody's leaving the club or a restaurant or a bar or whatever the case may be, is how do you combat some of those kind of issues when you're dealing with scooters, bikes, and so on? It's almost inevitable, right? And so I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer right now as to how to combat that or what that needs to be to lower those numbers or whatever the case may be. But those are some of the things that I think of when I say this is an uphill battle. I think of, okay, what are the challenges that come with this? That's where the energy should be given on what needs to happen to address that.
But again, this is why the mayor's saying, why don't we experiment with some things?
Yeah.
And if they work, then we continue to do that. If they don't, they don't, right?
I want to flag one quick thing for pedestrian infrastructure. Pedestrians are completely different from bikes in that they're 5 million year old technology. People have been doing walking for a long time, which means that all of us are experts on it. And we learned how to do it a long time before we learned how to drive. So I think that with pedestrians, as much as anything, there is somewhere where maybe in biking, you're like competing with cars and you've got these tensions. With pedestrians, I think you really, really have to listen to the people who are actually doing it and build systems that are following people's behaviors and not forcing them to fit into a non-pedestrian modality. The second thing is, having been in cities where I just want to frame a note, we might want to even have a principle that like we don't want to sacrifice pedestrians to cycling programs, for example, or anything. Because having just been in Amsterdam not too long ago, there are streets where like, I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to walk, but it seems like I'm supposed to dodge around these trees because it's very clear where the cars go, it's very clear where the bikes go, and pedestrians just got left out of the planning process. So I don't want to shift us with all around enthusiasm for new bright shiny objects into devaluing 5 million-year-old tech.
Thank you, Adam.
There is a guy named just think his name for this book called Near to Far, and he talks about like right now the primary vehicle that we have to move through the world are these cars that are designed to go 80 miles an hour and survive a crash. The majority of the trips that we take tend to be under 5 miles, and on average they're about 20 to 30 miles an hour at the speed is. And so I do think if we were to fast forward 30, 40, 50 years and look back, this question of like the emerging tech, like what does e-bikes look like, think about an aging population, what kind of city are we making for folks to thrive? Right now the dominant answer is like, you have to have a driver's license to navigate, that's who the city is for. But if this notion of like the 880 cities, if we want to be a place for young families and for kids to thrive, if parents don't feel comfortable sending their kids across, riding their bikes a mile to go pick up something, that feels like a red flag as far as like that insufficient infrastructure. And so the idea of like, do aging populations feel comfortable navigating the city without a car, or do young people feel comfortable navigating a car? If we can cater to those populations, I think it'd be good for everybody.
So that is an awesome segue to our next question, so thank you very much. So our next question is, we can go to the next slide here. What are equity elements we should consider in the mobility movement? So you talk about different population types, different user bases. We mentioned earlier, equity is a very important value here at the city. So any kind of prioritization kind of viewpoints or lenses, we should look at this from an equity standpoint.
I'd like to talk about what David Bukowski always talks about is, like one being the ADA being like the bare minimum, but pointing out that we have like the elevator because of things like the ADA, and everybody benefits from that. So when you design for those that are most in need, quite often so many more of us benefit from that. And so I don't know if it's necessarily, I can't name equity elements, I don't know the definition of that, but I think when we start caring for the people most in need, we all benefit, and as the mayor has mentioned, it's like several times, like you might not need it now, but you're gonna need it later on, and you wanna design a city in which you can age in place, and I think that that deals with a lot of other further problems that we might have. So we have to think a little bit more holistically, because none of our problems are isolated, and if we try to approach with like these isolated, very narrow solutions, we end up having to have like all these other strategies to deal with a problem that's enmeshed in a network of other systems. So we have to take a holistic approach.
I think a concrete example is if you're coming up with a whole citywide map and you're identifying where pedestrian infrastructure and bike infrastructure and transit infrastructure should go and what each street should look like. The streets where vulnerable road users are the most vulnerable are the ones where car traffic is very heavy and very fast. So, like, why do we have bike lanes on residential streets when we should have them on streets like Fulton? Like, that's just an example of how we're applying equity.
I come back to a communication thing. So if we start from the position that equity is important, then one thing we're not doing very well as a city right now is tracking who is using the modes that they're using right now. So the Rapid just did a survey, and I was happily surprised to find how many people responded in that survey walk as a way to get to work, and I think it was like 6%, and about 3% use transit, and about 3% use bikes. Now, the next question I'd want to know is, so I'd like to monitor that and name it and start tracking it, but we don't have any way to do like bike counts right now. So when people scoff, it's hard to come up with, if you don't have data to respond to scoffers, then you're just, throwing anecdotes at each other. The other, in terms of, I wish one of our city values was like, figure out, track actually, get data. Because it's not a city value, but maybe it should be a city value, right? Like
Accountability, maybe.
Like making stuff up is not a great way to do anything. But the other part of that for me is, I often think that when we're having, the pedestrian and biking conversation particularly, I would love to have demographic analyses of those users, because I guarantee you that biking skews poor. It's just that those people don't get seen. So the people picking up cans they're always on a bike. They're not in a car. People who are, I was in Miami biking, and somebody joked that the only people in Miami biking are people who just got out of prison. Well, yeah, right. There are programs that give returning citizens bikes. So I think that biking skews towards equity, but I don't have any data to prove that in their habits. So I think we should go gather that data. Like if you show that the median bike user is making $20,000 a year less than the median car user, then what we're doing has an equity value just because we're doing it.
I want to add that I'm just concerned with the state of politics in this country. So I want to be careful of how the words that we use. The emphasis on the words that we use, not what we end up doing. If we use different words and we get the same goal that we all want to get, let's use other words, because people are hyper focused on certain words, and if I'm not gonna die on the hill, like I need to use that word. I don't care. I want to get the work done. So if that is something that we need to be concerned about in the grants that we're writing or in the legislation that we're writing, let's switch up that word, because what we're really trying to get at is fixing this for our residents, and fixing it for those people that are in need, and identifying maybe needs that we haven't seen before. So I just want to make that clear, but I think Kevin had something.
Thank you.
From an overarching perspective, I think we've prioritized the bottom for decades here. Often those are the people that generally speaking can afford it or are forced to afford it. So I mean, that's just a general principle of that. All the other modes have been de-emphasized and not given the equity that the car has, just to make sure it's a point of emphasis.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about affordability.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I want to say, which I like, which is that one of the reasons why I don't like to call things bike infrastructure is because it is not exclusively for bikes. And especially, and that's why I usually use mobility or something infrastructure, because, a protected lane is infrastructure for people doing all sorts of things, active transportation. But also it is infrastructure for people with disabilities. It is infrastructure for people who use, a motorized wheelchair, for instance, bike lane, for that also. And so I think that if we can think about these things as not just, this is for bikes, this is for people who walk, this is for a scooter, and we think more holistically, then we capture everyone's headset. If you design for, ADA based curriculum. Another thing to point out, and this is why for these types of discussions, I always use safety as the North Star, because the end of the day, I think the goal for any transportation system is to keep people alive, first of all. It's insane how many people die on our roads every year. And it is true that it's difficult to change behavior. The element of drunk driving, whatever, dangerous, reckless driving, you know, that's a conversation that probably needs to happen at a state or federal level. But there is still like a wealth of research that shows that when you invest in protected mobility infrastructure, it makes the road safer for everyone. People in the car, people in that bike lane, people who are walking, transit, whatever. So I think that is important to consider, that like these things aren't just for people who are biking. It really is for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's important context to look at the mobility blueprint, because as mentioned earlier about the bicycle action plan and a few other plans that are a little bit more segmented, this is looking at that holistic network and saying one mode doesn't exist in isolation. They have to exist together and then they benefit each other. So specifically on equity, before we move on, it's obviously a very broad word and it's used in a lot of different ways, but kind of what we're looking for here are, income equity, ability equity. Like, are there any other elements that you think you would like to highlight for us to look at from that standpoint?
I think I'm going to hit on, if we're looking at bike lanes, bike infrastructure, if we're looking at pedestrian infrastructure, I don't want to see every ward but third ward getting this, right? Like, that's a large part of it for me. And so one thing I'll mention, I just had the opportunity to check out the Atlanta Beltline, which I'm not going to say that's what I want to see for our city. But I bring it up because it's a really cool concept. It's, this Beltline for walking, biking, mobility, all making soon a complete circle all around Atlanta, and then interconnected spaces, whether they might be protected bike lanes on roads or so forth, to help kind of traverse that. And I bring that up because, one, I think it's cool, but two is, they started in the area of the city that had historically received the least investment, right? And then I also think, and so I think being able to do that is really important to me. But then the second thing I look at is from an economic standpoint. I think individuals who have less economic mobility are going to be less likely to have maybe the 45-mile-per-hour bike. So making sure that, and I think to Mary Grant's point is, it's probably going to be someone will be utilizing a bike that is not an e-bike. So making sure we still are thinking through that, so they're not, in danger of having to share a bike lane, path, what have you, with a motorized bike going at.
You can buy it for a grant, they're not that expensive. So I don't think there is actually that huge barrier, which is why in Manhattan, like every delivery driver in Manhattan's got a bike that goes as fast as mine. Like, there's just not that big a barrier. $1,000 is not a huge barrier. But the other thing I want to just flag is, and yeah, Ken, maybe we should just use the word fairness instead of talking about fairness elements. That might be a better way to reframe it. I could give an infomercial right now about raised intersections, and I won't. But I think that ADA curb cut things are not the best option. I think raised intersections are. And we can have a longer conversation about that, but I think when we talk about safety, it's really important that we understand there are competing desires and competing objectives for in safety conversation, and by that I mean our emergency vehicles will often tell us they don't want things that will make roads safer for bikes or pedestrians, and they're going to say so in the name of safety. And so I don't think we should shy away from that conversation. I think it's a conversation that has to be had, but it can't be that somebody invokes safety, whoever invokes safety first wins and has a veto. So I just want to point that out, that the whole conversation around transportation, you're absolutely right. My joke is my primary objective when I'm trying to get from point A to point B is to not die. Our secondary objective is to get there. I think all of what we're doing is inextricable from the conversation about safety.
So, thank you, everyone. Next question we have, and this one I'm going to do a little bit of a preamble beforehand, but very interested in what everyone has to say here. So this is talking about emerging trends and technologies, but I don't want it just to be long-term. So like we'll have flying cars in 10 years, I'm sure we've been saying for 50 years. But so generally it's things, the mayor's point, like what can we do tomorrow? What can we do the next day? I've asked my team and we've looked into some things that are going on around the world, and I think your earlier point was cost, quickness, and reversibility. So looking at it through that lens, are there anything that you would like us to look into or highlight for this, not just this blueprint, again, the blueprint doesn't need to be done before we do other things. I'm not trying to say we're gonna look at it in 3 years, but yeah, we're interested in those. And like I said, we did some research, we looked into it. I think those are the 3 questions that you have to look at. So any off the top? of your-
Yes, I get big category, is speed governors in automobiles. I'd like for us to look at that. Nothing that's gonna happen in the next 5-10 years, but we should be looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
There's a lot of, it's not even emerging, but there's a lot of existing technology that currently the city is precluded from doing because of state laws. And so things like, traffic enforcement with cameras, like red light cameras, speed cameras, that's illegal in Michigan. And so I think if we could look at what, emerging technology was important, but also existing technology that just we can't do because of the state of Michigan.
And that's the hope for my clarification, because I put emerging, but I mean
Oh,
emerging
okay.
even tomorrow emerging. It's what we do differently.
So tomorrow, yeah, and some of this, if the blueprint can have priorities for advocacy at the state or federal level policy changes, but this because it's probably not legal to do speed governors. I don't know where it would be, but that would have to be part of a strategy to be how can we implement technology that we know works that is currently not possible.
I've got 2 companies that I'm working with right now, one out of Chicago and one actually here in town in Michigan State right now, and they both are working with municipalities around the country around safety and intersections downtowns, in most downtown cities. And it's everything from using AI to put street lights and do certain things with lighting to it can recognize a gunshot and the type of gun that it was shot from and be able to pinpoint where it happened at. They're doing all types of cool stuff. So I think looking into some of those things around the safety of downtown, when we talk intersections, biking, all those things, these type of technology plays could play a part into some of that moving forward as these companies continue to grow and do more.
What about, well, you might be going into this, but what about things like temporary physical infrastructure or?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, solar crossing, solar power crossing incident flashers. They can, right, they're not forever, they're not that expensive, they don't require hardware. There may be limitations to them, but I think there's something we could really move even into construction sites. So in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as far as I can tell, if you were gonna block a sidewalk now, you have to put in a crosswalk. That's part of what you have to do. And, if we had 20 of these things that we could rent out to construction projects, then if you need to block the sidewalk for a year, you gotta put in a crosswalk at both ends of your thing with an instant on flasher that stops people getting killed. That's probably semi-mature technology. Second, this is semi-mature, but it's emerging. I really would like us to pilot rumble strips for bike lanes. You can plow over them, you can still clean over them. We've conditioned and trained on our rural roads. Everybody knows you hit a rumble strip now, you're like, oh shit, I should get off my cell phone. Or, oh shit, I'm falling asleep, right? Rumble strips are cheap as heck. My phone tells me they're $800 a mile. So a way that now I think we'd have to pilot them, we'd have to get input from bikers, if people are damn, when I hit those things, I fall off my bike. We'd have to be careful how we design them. But I think rumble strips have the potential to level us up from just a white painted line. I think we should be thinking, how can we do better than a white painted line? Because we have a lot of white painted lines around town. And how we level up those, I think rumble strips are something we should think about. Yeah. The third weird thought that I should have 30 seconds ago, and I forget who triggered this thought. Oh, you did. So here we go. Here's a provocative thought. We are all, nobody here showed up in a Speedo, and nobody here showed up with a mohawk, right? That's because we're all herd animals. We tend to like to do what the herd expects us to do. So we all know what we're supposed to wear to this meeting, and we all, you can hardly pick us out of a lineup based on our clothes, right? We all are basically wearing the same clothes.
Some of us might have Speedos under.
Yeah, only 2 of us wore sports coats. They're the outliers. You didn't get the balance. But if you can make fun of me, I can make fun of you.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I have long suggested, I've been advocating, East GR is doing this, I call them speed shamers, the things that tell you how fast you're going. They just have them permanently installed on corners that are pissed off about East Grand Rapids. And I know I've heard from engineers like, oh, there's drop off in compliance. Like maybe, but I feel ashamed every time I drive by one and I'm going faster than the speed. And shame is a powerful tool. If you can't mandate it, shame is not a bad second choice. So here's my crazy thought, guys. Yeah, we can't give people tickets with cameras, but what if we could publicize? What if we had a website where we actually said, look, this person blew, what if we had a red light like website? Like, look who blew a red light. We're not giving any tickets out, but if we can literally capture, I don't think there's anything in the state law that will prohibit us putting cameras on nasty intersections, taking pictures, and instead of doing anything enforcement, publicizing. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Rapids did that a number of years ago with the busted newspaper.
What?
People who committed crimes in Rapids, and they would end up in the busted
Exactly.
newspaper every week.
Exactly. So
We
we do
leave it at all the
we
restaurants,
do a busted
barber shops.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and I'm sorry to our Rapid representative, but like, I've been like thinking about narking out some bus drivers, because I've seen some bus drivers breaking, speeding, and also running red lights recently. Yeah, and you know, I thought, well, we can get cameras on the buses, but we could also get cameras at the intersections. And if buses started showing up running red lights, I bet that probably changed our
Yeah, Robert S. would list these people off on the radio every week as well. He would get the busted paper and name them one by one in the crime. And
Just let's all vote on the nastiest intersection in town. Just do one of them and see what happens.
All right, Ken.
Yeah, I think something that could be done relatively quickly, something that the mayor is kind of mentioning is, I think formalizing a program that a lot of us cyclists already use, that it's not really apparent, it's not the intended purpose of it, but I see construction shutting down of roadways to change the pavement or whatever. I see that as an accidental bike lane. It's the only time when I get the road all for myself, and I love construction season because it just means I'm more safe and I enjoy it. And so I think formalizing that, so pulling the data of how often we're doing that, does it affect traffic? And so when we do implement something like temporary bike lanes and stuff like that, when we do get the initial pushback from the community, we can say, well, it affects it this much compared to construction zones. And construction zones is something that we see as a necessary evil. And so I want to have that data to support that because we already shut down roads. And sometimes it's even hard to get by with your bike. You walk. And so the city often defines things like that as closing down a roadway. I think what we can do when we talk about these temporary bike infrastructure is we're reimagining the roadway. It's just not, your car won't fit there. You can still walk, you can still roll, you can still bike. So I think that is probably the quickest, the lowest barrier thing we can do. And then to cover ourselves, we pull that data to show it's not just, like the mayor was talking about, like people have these feelings and they can't back it up with anything. We can back it up because we know what the construction timeline is, what it has been before, the amount of, there's the data, we just have to pull it together. And I think that's really important to show in the future, how many people more have we pushed through this place? Because when a construction zone starts, traffic pretty much stops. People don't really move there. There is the cyclist that we bike through there, and it's our accidental bike lane. But if it's separated protected bike lanes or a pop-up separated protected bike lane, we can measure that and see growth.
Thank you.
I think it's been mentioned at previous meetings, and this might be this I look at as a negative emerging trend, which is police don't seem to be enforcing speed, red lights, so on and so forth. I don't know if I see it getting better. So this element of what can we do, I think putting actual cameras at, Michigan doesn't allow that, don't get me wrong, but at stoplights.
No, we can't use infractions. That's my point. I think we put the cameras on.
Okay.
I should clarify, there's already legislation and there's a pilot program going on with construction zones on red light enforcement cameras. So that, even though that it has been something for many years that Michigan has not allowed, there's a trend moving
No,
elsewhere, so.
I'm sorry, I was there for all that, it took 6 years, it was Lima, it's only in construction on highways, like, I think the odds of us getting a statewide fix on that are approaching zero, and those conversations were completely silent. No one was saying like, oh, let's try it on construction sites and let's see if we can build it out. Like, I did not hear anybody express that sentiment while that was getting done. I could be wrong, I'd love to be wrong, but I don't want false hope on that. I don't think that's a trend. I think that's something Lyon worked on for about 10 years and finally got done. But
Sorry, Chad, what were you, did you wrap that, or finished your?
Oh, yeah, so then the other thing in this, again, you made me think of, there's this idea of tactical urbanism, right? So, you know, what are some elements of this is a way we can practice tactical urbanism? One such way I was thinking of was people are going down my road really fast in cars. How much does it cost for me to purchase one of those?
I have a radar detector, it costs $100. You get it on Amazon, and you can like go video. Like, I just haven't had time to do it. But like, I want to stand on Michigan Street with my radar detector and be like, so I'm there and I'm out on Michigan Street. Let's see how fast people are going. Oh, look at that car going 55. Yeah, $100. Go buy it. Start videoing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not illegal to to take people's speeds when they're going down the street.
From the standpoint of pulling together a mobility blueprint, I have a question about how you see these like quick builds. Is the purpose to demonstrate how a bike lane would be implemented on the street in order to get like or consensus or approval that it should be implemented permanently?
So I'm really glad you asked this, Janelle, because I was gonna ask y'all. I hear a lot about quick builds and that kind of thing, and the one thing I've heard is just things aren't happening fast enough.
Yeah.
But is there anything else? Tell me more. And can I maybe start here with Adam or start with Wesley and kind of go around? I'd love to hear just from each one of you a few words on like, why are you so interested in quick builds? That's a good question.
I think a large value of infrastructure is what it invites into the points that were made earlier about it being disconnected. Even to get here this morning was like far right, and I'm sorry about being late, but it's like there's a lane, there's not a lane, you're like merging traffic, you gotta jump over 4 blocks to compute. So it's like, it really does take a lot to navigate a safe route. And the idea of having some sort of minimally viable network, even if it's low fidelity, enables folks to experience safer routes. It invites that type of behavior more than disconnected, which still necessitates a lot of problem solving on behalf of the individual.
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm most interested is because of how the city, does infrastructure improvement. Basically, in order to get anything on the street, it has to be falling apart. And so if the street outside your house, whatever, is like not falling apart, it's not gonna change until it falls apart. And so if we can have like, and I think Janelle said this earlier, that like, why are we having like bike lanes in residential neighborhoods? We should have them on like Fulton, Fuller, Leonard, Michigan. All of these like high volume roads that frankly you need to traverse the city. And like, if Michigan's not up for reconstruction, we're not gonna be able to do anything. And so, if we can enable quick build infrastructure on streets that aren't actively falling apart, then we start to get towards something that approaches a network. Instead of just saying like, oh, well, this section of Buffalo is up for reconstruction, so we're going to bike lane there. But they're not going to go anywhere, because that's how it is. And I think that's why, to me, I'm interested in it. So then I had one tiny point, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The technologies, which was that it is insane to me that Grand Rapids has no school zones.
Doesn't have what?
School zones, like in front of schools, you don't have like lower, like speed limit.
We do have schools.
Yeah, but not in front of all the schools.
Yeah, that's a technical question, but I can talk a bit more about that. Anything else?
No, that's
You guys are, but in Everett, let's see how quickly you can get your thoughts out, Kevin. Need to be.
I mean, that's a huge value in a lot of bigger return investment projects, so they have obviously a part of this, but I think we clearly your point, it's going to be 2 years before we really see the end of this, and there's a lot of issues with the connectivity right now, so we need to accelerate that process, especially the easy wins needs to be a focus to show that we get that momentum, because I think, yeah, everything keeps getting pushed back. I know 2 years in the traffic planning world wasn't that long, but kind of the feeling world, it's a long time.
What exactly was the question?
My question is, there was a lot of conversation around, and has been for, the whole entirety of this board that I've been around, is this question about quick builds. We'd like to see quick builds. And so my question is, tell me more. What is, what's so attractive about quick builds in your mind?
I'm not sure,
Quick build is where you do something like you put in temporary measures to build a network instead of, and it could be anything. You could put out Jersey barriers, you can put out little things. We do them in traffic safety. If you ever see the orange little thingies that look like a roundabout kind of, that's a quick build. They look a little temporary.
Yeah, no.
So can you think of any, what would be the reasoning for doing something like that? Really focusing on that? And that's okay when you come back to you, because I think the mayor's ready.
So, I think it's proof of viability. So, the Building the Cycling City book has this great example of highway goes through a park and they have a referendum on getting rid of it and it barely passes. And 30 years later just for funsies, they surveyed, did anybody think we should put the highway back in this park? And people were like, are you insane? It was like 90% of the people didn't want, people don't believe things till they see them. So I would love to see a phase one, fast, and I'm thinking fast and reversible, rumble stripped corridor for all the length of Wealthy, all the length of Fulton, and eastern till it connects Wealthy. And that might involve things like some ramping over the bulb outs that currently make lack of continuity on Lake Drive, because every time you have a 90s bulb out, it's like an opportunity to die. But you could ramp over those things. We could hard surface over whatever little bits of grass are on those bulb outs. So anti-bulb outing, whatever. But if you could do that fast, then people would be like, oh wow, you can bike all of Lake Drive. I live in East Grand Rapids. I could bike downtown. But you can't bike downtown unless you finish Fulton. But if you actually did Fulton, Lake, Eastern, you'd be getting into the third ward. You'd be getting down to the Gentex, the folks, there's about 4,000 jobs down in the Cottage Grove neighborhood. And if those folks could viably connect up on Eastern, which has already got a bike lane for most of it, Lake Drive is almost got a bike lane. But if we could finish it and make that something that Adam could ride on, be like, yep, this is okay, I can live with this. Like, do the smell test for a few bikers. And then Fulton, if you could do all of Fulton. And it's close. I drive Fulton a lot and I think about it and I think it's doable. But if you could do that, you're not doing it everywhere. But then everyone would be like, why can't you do that on my side of town? Like, everyone would want one, I would think. But not until you can show that it's possible. Until you show it's possible, it's the unknown. So that's why I think fast.
I appreciate Craig asking that too, because I think I may have had a different concept.
That's okay, and if you have a different idea about what that means to you, tell me more.
I don't think any of this is me wanting to say, hey, we should get away from long-term plans. We need long-term plans, and that the quick build should be rationale for our long-term plans too. I think, especially, I lived in the Baxter neighborhood for 4 years. I was part of a neighborhood association where we would look at the master plan previously and say, hey, we had this in here, but it didn't get done. Baxter definitely didn't see any value from this, nor did we accomplish what we said we wanted to do. So I think there's an element for me that says, okay, well, we're saying we want to do this and we're not doing it, so what was the whole point of people showing up, asking for things, so on and so forth. So what this gets to with the quick builds is, I think it's exactly that point of, I don't want to be afraid to try things anymore, maybe this is because I just finished reading Abundance, but like, do we want to build and try and create things? And I think a way to do that is to palpably put it, say, hey, we think this could be a good idea, and guess what? If it's a bad idea, we can knock it down. Because if we don't try it, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. And personally, I'm a part of a generation that wants to see ideas from this generation getting mobility too. And it's not just my generation putting these ideas out there too.
I actually agree with everything that's been said. So I agree with Laura, Mayor. I mean, I also think we could use these as a way to influence and possibly alter a long-term plan, because what we thought would work, now we know is different. So I think it can be a dual accomplishment, and I think it would change the public's perception of how long it takes government to do things. And the perception is, I think it's unfair many times to the staff, but at the same time, perception is a problem. Okay. So speaking of perception, I totally apologize. I have a conflict. So I'm putting you on the spot. Do you mind closing out?
I got you.
Okay. I really apologize for that. But this is probably the most productive conversation I've been a part of on this commission. So
Can I also point out that if things are reversible, you way minimalize your resistance. So like if we set on, like hypothetically, on a hypothetical street starting with W, if the bike lane infrastructure there was reversible by design, then you wouldn't get people saying, my guide is going to kill my business. The answer to that would be, we're going to try this for 6 months. And if we're wrong, like we can revert to the status quo. Like we have a we're going to pilot this.
go back to white lines.
Exactly. So the more you're like, if people come in and say, I think this is going to cause a zombie apocalypse, we'd be like, let's try it. When the first zombie shows up, we can have another discussion. But until the zombies show up, we don't. I think it's going to cause doubling cancer in the city. Well, maybe it will. Let's try it, right? But if you do a 30-year project, you're like, we are sure it's not going to cause the zombie apocalypse. I'm not sure how much.
Me neither.
Ken?
Chris? Right?
On everything.
Oh, you didn't have that? Oh, okay.
I mean, I can't add
I didn't
since
skip
if you
you,
want.
sorry.
No, I like Richard. I agree with everything that's been said so far as well. I agree with all of it. I think the ideal of an MVP, just this minimal viable product, to put it out there, test it out for 90 days, 6 months, whatever that time frame is. If it works, okay, it makes sense to continue to invest in it. If it doesn't, pull it back. You save a ton of money and a ton of work and a ton of headache. That's simple.
I heard the question as, why are we interested in these quick builds? One would be it's good design. We talk about some of our city goals or whatever, like one of it's like excellence, like don't we want to be known for that? I think we should. And the second thing is it's a pressing issue. We wouldn't be asking this question of like, why should we be doing quick builds if like every quarter mile there was like 3 12-inch like potholes. We'd be like, this is a pressing issue, we need to deal with this now. It is very difficult to get around the city if you don't have a car. And so we need to test this quickly because, as mentioned before, the government can move really slowly and it doesn't have to move that slowly. So we can start leading and showing that you can prototype things, and hopefully it gets beyond this department, it gets to other departments as well.
Janelle, since you asked the question, I want to hear from Wesley, and then you get to round up. All right, okay.
Well, not too much that I can add going after everybody else, but I will say I want to echo what Adam said about just connectivity. A lot of that is like there's major arteries where there's like some bike paths here, but they may not connect to this. Like even when I ride my bike here, only being not far in West Grand, I there may be a bunch of bike lanes here, then a giant gap, and then more bike lanes, and there's a lot of spots where it's just the last couple, let's say half mile of, if it's connected, it would connect all the main arteries, and I think there's a lot of that. Like you couldn't bike probably from East Town to West Side at all. Like that's, I mean you could, but it's not going to be a straight way there.
Sure, I'll say that quick builds are they're a temporary solution to create a connected network. I'll also add that if that's going to be something that's part of your capital list for your blueprint, it's going to be a lot of money to propose connecting every single segment. It would be more beneficial to pick a route, pick a loop, and connect all of those pieces, and then demonstrate that that loop is being used by people and gather feedback. I'll also add that I see a lot of merit in building and studying from things that are like actually in the environment, rather than a lot of transportation planners just run computer analysis models and they don't really address the psychology of street design. A lot of it has to do with like fear and perception of like their infrastructure, and you just can't get that if you're just looking at a computer model. You have to talk with people who are using your quick builds or whatever. So.
Okay,
I
so,
have one more thing, just
No.
back to this. Just the emerging trends or technologies, thinking about places like Bentonville that are leveraging their natural park and trail network and coordinating that with their bicycle infrastructure, I think is interesting. I know, like, what is it, West Michigan Bicycle Biking Association, or like there are other regional trails, and I just wonder how can the micro plan also align to the macros, so that way it's like, oh, if I'm riding my bike from Lowell, I can get right downtown, and it feels like I'm downtown, like it feels beneficial to think about those larger plans and how a possible mobility network or what a prioritized list of things could be prototyped.
Just be that's
does everybody have a second? Oh, no, I'm kidding. Okay, go ahead.
This is meant to, like, for example, like on Walker, there's no bike lane once you get past the city boundary, so it's coordinated with entities, or even in our Rapid and One or East London, there's no way to connect to the forest, its own bike trails safely. So just looking at the regional connectivity.
Okay, so what I heard were three distinct things from you all. Tell me if I got this wrong, or if there's something else to add. One is a connected, safe, comfortable network instantly. It's a true network instead of bits and pieces. Public trust, building back public trust with speed of doing something, and then also that demonstration to the public to show them, no zombie apocalypse, there's bike lane. And the third thing was this buy-in with temporary and lower cost solutions. I'm going to avoid the term low cost solutions. It's lower cost. Things are quite expensive. So those are the three things that I heard really loudly, which connect back to these values that we were talking about, whether you knew it or not. So it's really super helpful, and it helps me understand a little bit more about that type of solution to the greater problem, which is a disconnected network, right? So, Max, you were facilitating today.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, that's great.
I'm excited about this.
That was super exciting. So our final question is kind of open-ended, and I put it at the end for a reason, because I thought we would have dozens of policies and programs that came up through the previous conversation. We absolutely did. So this is not, don't revisit what you said before unless you really want to, you absolutely can, but anything that you feel like we haven't covered today in terms of a policy, we've talked about things from like potentially subsidizing e-bikes, or doing things like limiting car speeds and all sorts of different things. So those are obviously policies. There's also programs such as like we could do affordability programs around certain roads. There's lots of different ideas out there. So just anything that you don't feel like we've covered today in terms of some cool short, long, mid-term programs or policies.
And as a time management,
Yeah.
we have about 7 minutes for this conversation, because I want to leave a little bit of time for you all's comments at the end. So what are we thinking?
E-bike rebate program, but then also finding a way so that we don't have to be, so that you can go cashless on the Rapid.
Okay.
Just tap and go.
Great.
It's a longer conversation, but yes. Okay.
One thing that I have been thinking about in the conversation is, I think it came up when we were talking about like tourism and people from Rockford or whatever coming into the city. One thing that I always pay attention to when I you know, get tickets to any sort of event, like at the Grand Angle Arena or at like the DeVos Performance Hall, anything like that. I always pay attention to the emails they send beforehand. That's like how to get here, and the only thing they say is where to park. And that always makes me really sad because like there are so many ways to get to downtown. And when people are talking about like, oh, there's like no transit network, but if you're thinking about like, if you're going anywhere in the city, the easiest place to go is downtown with transit currently because of how the network is. And so it seems to me that there's an opportunity to involve other stakeholders in their messaging to be like, hey, you can take the bus, you can ride your bike on like the trail, you can like use our car share, you can use the lime scooter, whatever, you know. Visibility for these other types of buttons is very important.
Yeah, I support that. That's well said. I think too that again using the Rockford reference, people just want to get to a certain part of the city. They don't know if they're going through the city of Walker, the city of Grand Rapids, the city of East Grand Rapids. But everybody's got their own way of doing things. You know, if there's a way, I know there are apps to that. But to your point, if the institution, the organization, the event, whatever, could articulate, here's how to find out, you can figure on whatever boat you so choose, whatever it is, how that you may enter, because we don't think we're driving like, oh, what's the city of Grand Rapids policy? Like, I'm going from Rockford to downtown, from the mall or wherever, I don't really know what to look for, so some continuity across all those would be very helpful in communicating as such. I think that's a great point. I knew you were going to say that about where to park. Like, what's the other ways that we can also get there? I think if people that just, I'm savvy to that, know, but the people that don't, they don't even know. And I've offered using the dash to get around, like, wait, I can park out in wherever. And they go, yeah, I can do that every day. Like, there's no need to come down for all that. It literally goes up to the But they don't know that exists or that that's a connectivity point. So solve that problem.
Three things. One, I'd like if this committee would express an opinion on, I think we need to update our regulations on cycling because our regs don't at all incorporate the possibility of e-bikes. That simply needs to get updated and there has to be a commission conversation about that. I pulled the regs and checked. Second of all, I would love to remembering a minute that this group also has to deal with like parking management, and that's a lot of what y'all spend your time on. I think the sooner we can get into start playing robustly in the air park space, the happier I'm going to be. So I'd love to see that move forward because I think potentially that frees up it does a couple things. One is it frees up a whole lot more parking spots if we can robustly get into that space. We just get a free resource. The resource is already there, and we activate. But also then, we can start showing it in our system, right? Like, we could actually model out of it. Like, there are 8 spots over here. Like, if we really had good data, if we did something like Tesla charging stations do or like Uber does, but for parking spots at Custer, that would be amazing and transformative, I think, in a lot of ways for, we've all been, none of us have been saying anything about anything positive about cars this whole meeting, but that's, I think, a huge opportunity for us. And the third thing I'll say is worth keeping in mind, a world in which we rely on individual homeowners to shovel their sidewalks is a world in which anybody with disabilities is hosed. Because all you have to do is have 1 out of 20 houses not comply, and you're done. So the city of Walker does citywide plowing, and last I checked, it costs like $10 a household. Like, it's really efficient to have the government do that because they start on one side of your block of a plow and they just keep going. Hiring somebody from Jenison who does lawn care in the summer to come in and plow my individual sidewalk in the winter costs them a couple $100. So it's a very inefficient model, but more importantly for me, lack of continuity means, sure, I can walk past the jerk that doesn't shovel and tromp through it, but blind people can't with wheelchairs can't, People with any kind of mobility issues can't. And I think that's the number one thing we could do for pedestrians actually, is address how badly we address snow on sidewalks.
Would it be possible to create a page on the Mobile GR website or something that would show real-time vacancies of parking around Grand Rapids?
So we run out of time, but that is a question I can answer for you later. We've talked about that in previous meetings, but let's follow up with that later. We're running out of time. But great question. Yes, we can, and we're working on it. Yeah.
So we are running out of time, sorry to say, because we'd love to keep talking. I know there's a lot more to be discussed. There's 10 minutes left of the meeting. Is there anyone who would like to have like closing comments? Oh, sorry. Well, I'm not.
Oh, no, I was gonna let you take it, man.
So before we move to the public comment period, is there any like wrap-ups that folks would like to have on this discussion? Again, knowing that we're at time, we have to be very quick.
10 out of 10 for how you ran this. So happy you did it. So grateful. This is like, I mean, echo what Rick said. So thank you guys.
You're welcome. But know that this was built around the things that you all chatted about over the year and things. So appreciate your input and your buy-in and your conversation and all the things that you guys bring to the table. So.
Any commissioner comments?
Oh, wait.
Right.
Start. So
Public comments.
you'll go to, you're on, you don't have any updates.
This shows you.
It's okay. Go to section 8 on your agenda.
Section 8?
Front page. So section 8, I'll help you out.
Oh,
So
any updates?
We do not have any updates this month for you. We skipped those so that we could focus on preparing for the workshop. We'll be back at your December meeting.
Now, any public comments?
There you go.
And there are none. Any commissioner comments?
Let's start down here with Wesley.
Nothing.
Okay, Janelle,
Oh, nothing besides the question I asked.
we'll get to you again.
I didn't know this was a public meeting. I thought it was just a,
I did too.
yeah, I thought it was just
Cameras
private.
didn't give it away. So any meeting of this body is public.
Yeah, I think this has been a productive conversation, probably one of the most I've seen in my years here, so this has been good.
I think the only thing on my mind from the last question that I'll put out there is, the power of businesses to help promote I work in a space where one of my teams is actively working with employees of businesses to help them understand or to find resources for transportation, childcare, oftentimes car repair. And so I do think that there is an opportunity to empower businesses to be able to share these resources with the individuals who work for them as well, as a potential to retain the business and to retain the individual. So, a lot to think.
So I'll just vlog again. I think I want to keep thinking about communication strategies and actually investing in that. My 1.5 car idea, loved it. The other thing I'll keep vlogging is I would be so happy if we had a Lake Fulton Eastern Starfish as an initial viability project. And I think it would actually make a ton of sense. And it actually, since everyone thinks in terms of wards as though we drew these things for communities of interest rather than because we needed to get the same number of people in each ward. It would there'd be a third ward presence, a first ward, and a second ward presence to that Starfish. So we've hit all the wards.
Well, I'm just really excited about this. I think, like others have said, I think this is one of the best conversations we've had, and feels like we're actually working towards something that would be a consensus. One thing I would just say is that I would love to see. I appreciate that as a blueprint, as a planning document, it has to be a longer term process. But one thing I would love to see is if we can come out of this discussion. I think we have some sort of shorter term recommendations that we can start making, and if we can sort of try to coalesce around what we've said today, that could be done, in addition to the blueprint discussion.
I get excited. It feels like the Rutgers Meeting Road and also this opportunity cast of a really clear vision, accountability of like, this is where we're going, this is where you're forward, or the master plan says, and just thinking about like the policy that can have teeth in it so that community members start to know like, this is where we're going as a city, this is where we're gonna be in 2050, kind of.
It's good, it's good. I would close it out and say,